afternoon, and welcome to the Booms and Bust Show. My name is Jonathan Davis, and the Booms and Bust Show, as you will know, is about free market capitalism. It's about hopefully you're spreading the word that what we need in this country and in this world is more free market capitalism. The solution is never more socialism, something I'm going to be talking about in the show today. And by the way, I'm recording this show on Sunday, the 14th of May. It's approximately 2:15 in the afternoon. I normally record on a Monday, but I'm in all-day meetings tomorrow, so I'm delighted to be doing so now. And I'm going to be talking about free market capitalism and how it affects us as individuals. And I'm also going to be talking about cronyism and socialism and how that affects us as individuals. If you want to speak with me, please do so. Email me at jd@theboomsandbustsshow.com, jd@theboomsandbustsshow.com, or for immediacy, almost, tweet me at boomsbustsshow. Tweet me at boomsbustsshow. If you're not following me there, please do so, and please retweet some of the things that I tweet and retweet. I do a lot of retweeting of really good stuff. People need to hear about the true alternative. They talk about the Tories and Labour, the Republicans and the Democrats. They're not alternatives. They're all on the same spectrum. They're all the bloomin' same. The true alternative. You know, they talk about left and right. No, that is not, there's no difference. There is no major difference. All they're doing is tweaking at the edges. The only true difference is free market capitalism. And unfortunately, we have precious little of it. I want to talk, first of all, about how free market capitalism helps us, not just economically, not just individually with a nicer house, a nicer car and whatever, but how it helps us in our search for freedom and liberty. Take technology, for example. Was it socialism that in May 1611 that we had published for the first time in London the King James Bible by the printer Robert Barker? What's that? 406 years ago? No, it was someone acting independently of the state, the fascist state, where the power was with the church and the king and the landowners. It was not with the people, but someone took it upon themselves to get printing going, using, in effect, the Gutenberg printing press. And the printing press, listener, created more freedoms than anything else over 1,500 years, overthrowing that 1,500 years of Catholicism and monarchic fascism. Technology continues to bring about freedoms and indeed prosperity. Look at how social media helps the fighters for freedom in the most fascistic states in the world. Look how the mobile phone has allowed the extraordinarily poor in Africa to jump straight to mobile banking and micro borrowing, $50 borrowing, so that they can buy seeds for their acre of worthless land and build a future for themselves. Did socialism create the iPhone? No. Capitalism did. Capitalism created the printing press. I remember a year ago talking on my show about this. I'm going to reiterate it. I'm going to repeat it. Did capitalism create fire? No. It was a particular, pardon the pun, spark of genius that did. And what about eating meat? Was that socialism? No. It was a particularly intelligent person who gave it a try. He or she didn't know if it would kill him, but in fact, he loved it. And as we all know now, it developed our brains and sped up the development of the human race. What about agrarianism and relatively modern farming, using fields, blocking them off, letting them lie fallow for a few years so that they can re-energize? Was that socialism? Was that the state laying that down? No, it was a genius who thought it up, and free markets were there, so he tried it and it worked. The printing press, the steam engine, the Davy lamp, telephone, television, the internet. And by the way, all of those were invented in Britain, one of the two greatest countries on the planet. And did any of these create harm for the people? No, but I'll tell you what they did do. They created harm for the elite. So the elite fought tooth and nail for them not to become freely available, or if they did, to clamp down. Look how you go round the fascistic states and you can't get Google. You can't get Twitter. Because when the state gets involved, the people haven't a chance. So, technology, free markets creates technology which brings us more freedom and liberty. Free markets, not the state. Because when the state gets involved, the people are toast. Let's move away from liberties and freedoms. Let's move on to how technology just creates greater prosperity. And I've got a couple of very simple examples of stuff that I've been doing myself over the last week or so. Last Saturday, my younger daughter, purely by accident, dropped my mobile phone, which is surrounded by a leather case. Unfortunately, it fell on the gravel, screen face down. I've had the phone for over 2 years, dropped it a couple of times, but always closed, so it didn't matter. This time, well, unfortunately, it broke the screen. The top half, it was broken horizontally. The top half just wouldn't function any longer. Went to the shop that repairs mobiles, £80 for a new screen. Well, I was out of contract. In fact, just a few weeks before, I'd agreed with my phone provider, service provider, that I could get a monthly price, 2/3 of what I've been paying, and I'd get vastly more, as it happens, data, which I could use in Europe, which is great because we go to France for our holidays. So I'm happy as Larry. So I'm thinking £80 for a new screen for a phone that's well over 2 years old. I wonder that Saturday, I wonder what will happen if I go looking on the web. Are there any pretty good phones, smartphones, for not a lot of money? And blow me, I start at 6 o'clock in the evening. 6:30, I found a Motorola. I think it's an M4 or a G4, something like that model, which was apparently the best overall value phone in 2016. I don't need a 2017 phone. I've been using a 2014 phone. So, or 2015, whatever it was. So, guess how much to pay outright. I've never bought a phone outright before because I wanted to keep my roughly £20 a month deal with 12 gig of data. Well, you can imagine my kids will have great fun using that when we're in France. £140 from John Lewis, of all places. The standard prices were around about £165, £175, although you can get them more. But for some reason, John Lewis, that weekend, or maybe always, I don't know, they had slashed their margins. 140 quid. 5 minutes later, 25 to 7, I'd bought it. And this is the amazing thing, listener. The following day, I walk into Waitrose, which is part of the John Lewis group, and I pick up my new phone on a Sunday afternoon. This is how technology helps us. Let me give you another example. I've just bought a new car a few weeks ago. I want to look after it, something, and what are the things that I can do? Do you know what? I'm going to wash my car more often, but you know what? I can't stand the prices of the garage car washes, and those guys in Sainsbury's smiling their faces off to get you to come and give them a lot of money. No, I don't want to do that. I wonder what it's like getting a pressure washer. Something I've never had before, I've never used. I've used the garage ones where, you know, you do the washing yourself with the lance, all that kind of stuff. I've always enjoyed doing that. So I asked a couple of people who know about this kind of thing, and they said, absolutely, go for it, not a problem, you'll enjoy it. So, last Tuesday, I'm on the web looking for a Karcher K4, and they range around about 180, 220 pounds. I found it for 146 pounds on Amazon, and because I felt that I was saving some money, I got a couple of extra additions, type, you know, brushes, things to go with it. So I paid about the same that I would have paid for other retailers. And indeed, I used it this weekend, and it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Now, this is the point. In both of those examples, I used the internet to search for the product or the general product. I didn't know specifically what one I wanted when it came to the mobile phone. I wanted to learn about mobile phones. Within 30 minutes, I'd done so. Because you know what you're looking for. We've used smartphones long enough now. I knew what I wanted in the pressure washer. I knew what model I wanted. So I was looking for price and value and so on and so on. Now you tell me how that hasn't helped me, because it has. Technology has enabled me to have the lifestyle that I want, the services and products that I want at as low a cost reasonable that I could find. That's the internet. That's technology. And that is indicative of how technology should reduce our cost of living. It should reduce our cost of doing business. And to a large extent, it does. So it helps us in the West. It helps the developing countries, macro basis, big picture, as well as micro, each individual household. And then you get governments who are bringing in protectionism, They're going to reverse, no doubt, the World Trade Organization's low tariffs, general agreement on tariffs and trade. That is going to go by the window over the next few years. You are going to see we are going to be bringing in inflation, even though you've got the likes of China investing tens of billions of dollars in the One Belt, One Road, in the railway that takes goods to and from and to China, right to Europe. It's the most fantastic development I can think of after the internet. And of course, America hates it. Protected global manufacturers who are manufacturing in Europe hate it because it's going to bring products even cheaper from China to our doorstep. This is what helps us. And I hear people all the time saying, but if we don't continue with the status quo, we've got to keep on helping the banks. We've got to keep on with zero interest rates and help to buy and all the nonsense, quantitative easing nonsense. We've got to keep prices, not just house prices, but prices high. The prices are getting too low. We've got to make them high, because if we let the thing fall apart, there'll be economic collapse and revolution. Listener, it's 180 degrees the other way around. This is the voice of the elite telling you what to think. Instead, we need the thing to collapse. That way, like I did with my phone and my pressure washer, our living costs will plummet. Our business costs will plummet. Tell me, listener, how can that possibly be bad for us and for the economy? Let the thing fall apart. Let our costs of living and doing business plummet. Thus, we will usher in 30 years of prosperity. Instead, we're in 30 years of depression. This is not helping. On the subject of Amazon, which of course is the American company that's taken online buying and delivery by storm, and how much does Amazon delight us? Isn't it amazing? The Chinese equivalent is Alibaba. And get this, between the two of them, the global gross value of goods sold as percentage of world GDP 10 years ago was 0.1%. This year, it will be 1.2%. So just two companies now account for 1.2% of global gross value of goods sold. Two companies. And there's every reason to expect that they will continue to grow their market share. Indeed, it is estimated in 10 years, those two companies will account for, listen to this, 3.2% of global gross value of goods sold. Now, Amazon has a huge stock price. If ever it has a crash, that doesn't mean collapse. If it ever has a even 20 to 40% crash in its share price, why would you not buy it? Alibaba only floated on stock markets a couple of years ago. It was the biggest initial public offering in global history. $200 billion. Yeah, it's hot to trot. UK election. I'm not going to go down who's going to win and all that. It's pretty obvious who's going to win. Tweeters who, on the face of it, want freedom and opportunity tell me that the Tories are crap. Others who want the same tell me Labour are crap, etc. So what do? They campaign for their side, as if their side will bring freedom and opportunity. What an absolute joke. As if any side, any political party at all, cares a jot about the people. I've got a kipper who's really making me laugh, this guy. He keeps telling me on Twitter his party cares and seeks to help the young. He's even got it in his Twitter profile. How? Show me how you care. Show me your policies where you're going to help the young. Because you're anti-immigration. Have you ever heard of a small second largest country in the planet called Australia, which has got severely controlled immigration? What about Japan, which has basically not got any immigration? I don't see the young being helped in either of those two first world countries. And you want to copy Australia? You're idiots, kippers, and you're self-serving. I get all these guys, including the kippers, the Tories, the socialists, build more houses, bring down house prices. What a load of arrant nonsense. I've got apparently studious and intelligent tweeters arguing with me that building more will help cap or even bring down house prices. Could you please give me a single example in history or anywhere geographically just now where you're right? They build phenomenal amounts of houses in China. I don't see any falling house prices. Or Australia or Canada, where, and these tweeters tell me, oh, it's about lack of land. That's what it is. It's lack of land. Have you never looked at a map to see how absolutely enormous China, Canada, and Australia are? I don't think there's a lack of land. For goodness sake. Do we really want to leave our grandkids and their kids and their kids and so on a goddamn concrete hellhole? A, it doesn't bring down prices. B, it enriches those involved in property. C, it leaves the worst possible legacy to future generations, but not for the elite. Do you think they'll have green spaces? You're damn right they will. In fact, they might even go to another planet, as you well know. How are these people on Twitter so stupid and yet so arrogant and self-righteous? And how do people listen to them? And why aren't you listening? Following me on Twitter? I'm serious. The answer to these issues is never, never, never more socialism. The answer is bring back capitalism. Always, always, always. End Help to Buy. Let the market set interest rates. Bring back Glass-Steagall. These are the solutions, not cap the rents or make the landlords do this or the other or build 1 million homes. There is zero evidence that what you say works. There is huge evidence that what I say works. What's interesting in the global economy right now is I read from Bloomberg, the headline is, London landlord home sales plummet as taxes slash returns. So this is about the Section 21, where since April the 6th this year, if you're a buy-to-letter and you've got mortgage interest, you will be able to charge less and less of that against your rent. By 2020, basically, you will no longer be able to charge the mortgage interest against your rent. Jennifer Pickford, a 39-year-old owner of 4 London rental properties, is not only avoiding purchasing more, she's considering selling the ones she has. She isn't alone. If I thought stamp duty was bad, she says, the tax relief issue really was the nail in the coffin. Pickford, an accountant from Surrey, an accountant who are brilliant at looking at the past, are total idiots when it comes to actually looking to the future as to what they ought to be doing financially. Don't ever ask an accountant what you should do for your finances. Never, ever ask an accountant. They have no idea what's coming down the pike. Didn't she know that these taxes were coming in? And didn't she think this might have an effect on the buy-to-let market? She says, it just makes the whole exercise unprofitable and pointless. Note the subconscious, the subliminal inclusion in the first sentence. Owner. She's got 4 big mortgages. She is not the owner of those properties. Tina Riches, a partner at law firm Smith & Williamson. Any high-rate taxpayer landlord whose mortgage interest is more than 3/4 of the rental income will see all of their returns erased by 2020. Under the changes, a landlord who pays 40% tax and has annual rental income of 15k or above will see profits fall 86% by 2020 compared to last year. Buy-to-let's toast. And I've got a chart there attaching to the tweet, the iTunes tweet of the show. Growth in individual unit sales of properties priced over $1 million, which is give or take about £800,000 in 2016 compared to 2015. And in London, did you know this? The number of £800,000 plus properties sold in 2016 compared to 2015 fell 35%. Down a third. The Hamptons, which is the super exclusive part of New York, down 18%. New York itself, down a few percent. Toronto, up 90%. I'm going to have to take a glass of water. Oh, I'll tell you, Toronto, it's incredible. The Labour manifesto relies heavily on the fatally flawed idea that there's something inherently virtuous about state ownership. Listener, the state is rigid and oh so often hugely incompetent. It is the killer of innovation, creativity, and above all, adaptability. Just go back to Darwin as to how we come to be here, because we are supremely adaptive, as indeed are all the other animals who are still here. If you put the government in charge of the Sahara Desert, within not a long time, there'd be no bloomin' sand there. The Tories will do nothing to help the people, except take us out of the EU. So thank goodness for small mercies. But after that, or anything beyond that, they become our enemy again, like all politicians. So I say to you again, if you're in a quandary as to who to vote for, because none of them are out there to help us, be assured of that. They are there to help the elite and to help themselves. They're not there to help us, the people. Spoil your ballot. Go to the ballot box. Don't sit on your couch watching Jeremy Kyle. Go to the ballot box, get your ballot slip and spoil it. Send them a message. Let's see if we can get the biggest number of spoiled ballots in British election history. That's the answer. Moving on. You know, I talked recently how astonishing the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is now the newest member of the United Nations Women's Rights Commission. Apparently Saudi Arabia empowers women. Well, a Saudi Wahhabi Islamic court has just sentenced a woman to 6 months in jail and 200 lashes. To which you're thinking, well, what's dreadful about that? The lashes, of course, outrageous. I mean, it's beyond outrageous. It's barbaric. Any idea what her quote crime unquote was? She stole a chocolate bar? No. She criticised the king? No. She was gang raped. It's funny how international socialists, and indeed a fair number of so-called free marketers who still rally against Israel, the second greatest country on the planet. It's fascinating how all these guys don't care about bans against Jews. Here is a list of Muslim countries that ban Israeli Jews: Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, Syria, Algeria, Brunei, Kuwait, Lebanon, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Malaysia, Bangladesh, United Arab Emirates. Countries that ban Israeli passports. Yeah, I'll put the list up. It's funny, no one ever talks about that. Do you remember me recently talking with aghast that Obama, well, I'm not too surprised, the guy's a fascist, how he got $400,000 for a speech on Wall Street, and that's how he's going to become something. He's probably going to make about $500 million, this guy, this absolute fascist. He's going to make $500 million. In 2009, to repeat what I said in the previous show, he said, I didn't run for office to help Wall Street's fat cat bankers. Yes, you bloomin' well did, Barack Hussein Obama. It's a bit rich, because he's delivering a speech to a sold-out audience in Milan. He's getting £2.5 million. And just to see the kind of thing that he and his banker mates get up to, here is one other small, tiny example, which you probably have no idea about. But this is what's going on in the world today. Puerto Rico, which is a municipality of the United States, it was placed under court protection last week, which is, in effect, it went bankrupt. It amounts to the largest ever US municipal bankruptcy ever, and it is a stark illustration of the depth of the economic crisis affecting this US territory, which has more than 3 million inhabitants. I mean, that actually is as much as many of the huge states in the US. If you just Google a map of the US population, you'll see that the vast bulk of the US residents live on the coasts. They don't live in 80% of the inner land. Puerto Rico and its agencies owe $73 billion to lenders. And that, by the way, that dwarfs the $9 billion in debt that bankrupted the city of Detroit in 2013. The move by the Federal Oversight Board, installed by Congress, is the culmination of years of economic distress and heavy borrowing that more recently has pitted Wall Street creditors hungry for payments against the struggling island. For over a decade, Puerto Rico's government, aka socialists and fascists, and its municipal corporations borrowed more and more and more, get this, to buy time to stave off deeper economic overhauls. Written in such a language that they don't actually let it be understood that what they mean is slash spending, slash the public sector, slash public sector pensions. But instead they say stave off deeper economic overhauls. Who the hell knows what that means when you're reading a piece? With government payrolls down over the last decade, pension funds have fewer workers contributing, and the plans are now underfunded by $45 billion. This is being replicated across the world. 10,000 miles away, you've got Greece, 10,000 from Puerto Rico. It's going to happen practically everywhere. Just give it time, boys. The major impediment to economic growth and prosperity for the people is our severely over-indebtedness. And as this example of Puerto Rico shows, the answer is not to do what needs to be done. Their answer is always more debt. And we'll just see what happens. Well, it's blooming obvious what's going to happen. We have more debt as a percentage of GDP than we've ever had in history. Do you know, in the 1950s, it took $1.70 of debt to create $1 of GDP. By the 1990s, it took $3 of debt to get $1 of GDP. It now takes $5 of debt to get $1 of GDP. This is called diminishing marginal returns. Where do you go? Do you eventually borrow $100 to get $1 of GDP? What about 1,000? No, the system will break apart long before that. Be under no illusion. Debt makes bad things happen. It's increasingly unproductive. Productivity in the West is now not much more than 0.5% per annum, and yet we've got all this amazing technology and globalization. You know, some of you listeners, you say, oh, globalization, oh, it's bad for jobs. Yeah, you say that until you go and buy something. Listen to this. The biggest economic blocs in the world, the US, the EU, China, UK and Japan, we are now at roughly 400% of debt. 4 times the size of the economy is debt. Now, you know what it's like to have a 3 times your income mortgage. Well, what about 4 times? Why do you think we've got such low/zero interest rates? To help you? Is it hell? 40 years ago, the global economy, this is according to the IMF, that bunch of crooks. But 40 years ago, the global economy had consistently growth of 7% per annum. 10 years ago, or over the last 10 years, should I say, it's been 1% per annum. Over the last 3 years, it's been negative. You think we're not in economic depression? We've had one of the longest economic expansions in history. 82 months compared to the average expansion of 60. So what's that? Just short already now. In fact, 82 months, 2 months off 7 years compared to the average, which is 5 years. But the expansion might be one of the longest in history, but it's also the weakest in history. Pent-up demand is totally exhausted. Rents are weakening in London compared to, we've got massive executive flats and houses being built in London, but yet rents are weakening. The stocks of cars for sale is absolutely soaring. This does not bode well, and this is it seems to me we are rapidly approaching the end of the economic upcycle. With all the stimulus last year, we had global GDP at 2.9%. That really is not good. This year it's going to be even less. And yet, between Japan, Europe, and America, you know, someone said to me, who's quite clued up, he said to me, how are the plates still spinning? I said, because between America, Japan, and Europe, they're printing out of thin air by pushing a key on a computer. They're printing $2,000 billion per annum and handing it to bankers. You couldn't make it up. This is why the plates are still spinning. But you know, in 2 years from now, and by the way, the stock market is a discounting mechanism. It looks forward. In 2 years from now, 20,000 billion, $20 trillion of debt is going to have to be repriced. And the problems accruing are going to be bigger than 1929. In the early part of last year, bank loans in America were rising at 10% per annum. They're now rising at just about 2% per annum. When that goes negative, we may well be on the cusp of the biggest recession ever. And yet, we get politicians talking about, on the one hand, how great is the NHS, on the other hand, how dire is the NHS. You want to know why the NHS is not up to doing its job? 2 reasons. Because Labour, through the Private Finance Initiative, Labour, who got re-elected twice because under them the NHS is secure, has landed the NHS with vast amounts of debt on which it has to pay interest. So when you talk about how much the NHS costs, think about A, what proportion of that is pure interest, and B, how the banks and the developers and the building companies have become richer than Croesus because of Labour. And secondly, I've got a chart here which is admittedly for America, but I'll bet it's the same in Britain. It's the growth of medical staff, in fact, doctors, actually, not nurses, doctors, in the last 40 years, and overlaid the growth in the number of administrators. Go and have a look at that chart on my Twitter feed, Booms Busts Show. You will be aghast. We're already at 47.5 minutes, and I haven't even yet started on economics, just about to. We'll see how far we get. I just mentioned in passing there that stocks of cars for sale are going through the roof. The next chart shows how lending on cars is negative. Well, that is hugely important. The car market is going to have a huge collapse on both sides of the Atlantic. To me, that's a given. I talked about $2,000 billion a year in quantitative easing. There's a chart of Bank of England, which is not actually one of the main culprits for a change. But they did cut the interest rate last autumn, Mark Carney. It was a total disgrace. The guy's a crook as far as I'm concerned. And I said that, by the way, I'm not kidding you. I said that live on BBC Radio on Friday. The presenter wasn't happy. And Fed and Bank of Japan and European Central Bank, quantitative easing, it's just totally frightening how these guys are creating an absolute hell for us all in the future. Not for me and my clients, not for my family, but I'm not joking. It's why you have to listen to what I'm saying, and you have to take heed and take action, because no one's going to bail you out this time. They bailed you out in 2009. They slashed the interest rates. They bailed you out. They can't slash interest rates this time. Market economics, above 50 on the index is expansion, below 50 is contraction. Eurozone, 56.8. This is strong. It's the 46th successive monthly rise in economic activity. This is strong. This is, as far as I'm concerned, a primary reason why the ECB will actually have to reduce printing money. It's currently, as I say, at about it's $60 billion a month, $720 billion a year. It was just reduced in March. It was $85 billion a month. They'll have to reduce further. This is the reason why the euro is on a rally, on a rising trend. Now I'll pass that. Stagflation is building, stagnation, economic stagnation, but inflation. US producer prices have spiked the most in 5 years. They're up to 2.5% year on year. Mild inflation, but inflation nonetheless. You know, do I believe that inflation's going to get out of control? No, I don't. Not initially. Initially, it seems to me more likely there'll be another bout of deflation because we'll be heading to recession. But then, for the next 10 or 20 years after that, they'll let inflation run riot. And if you haven't listened to the show, you won't know, or you might not have realized this, but what comes with sustained higher inflation? Higher interest rates. I messed up my own punchline there, but there we go. Interesting chart. Moving on to markets briefly. I'm on 51.5 minutes. There is a chart of the S&P over the last 17 years. There's a T chart there which you can see, which it does lend credibility to the thesis that we could see a 10 or 15% fall in the stock market to the lower blue trend line, as I've been talking about for weeks, and then a final rise up to the higher blue trend line, maybe by the autumn. Who knows? Maybe then that could be it. Good night, Vienna. We shall see. Da 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 da. What was the band in the 80s that had, was it Kraftwerk? I'm not sure. Someone perhaps tell me. Why DADA? Well, you have to ask yourself, where are we in the markets? And the next psychological chart shows you that it seems to me that we're somewhere between thrill and euphoria. After that, if we go into crash mode, we pass by anxiety, then denial, fear, desperation, panic, capitulation, which means everyone sells everything at the bottom, despondency, depression, and the whole thing starts again. We get the wall of worry, hope, relief, optimism, excitement, thrill, and euphoria. DADA, denial, anger, depression, acceptance. You watch, listener, how we will start with denial, how there'll be sheer anger. The government must do something. It's terrible. It's terrible. I am so angry. You'll be seeing people like that in the news. And then there'll be depression. And then there'll be general acceptance. And the elite will have won again. As you can see in the next chart, the amount of gold found by miners has plunged 85% over the past decade. But demand for gold is static. Do you think gold has a chance? Dead right, it does. And indeed, on that point, I've been saying for a couple of weeks that gold was just about to take off again. If you look at the chart of, focus on gold miners, because I'm more into gold miners than I am gold, although clearly one follows the other. You'll have seen a couple of months of a sharp correction in gold miners. That's from, let me think now, the end of March, end of February to the end of April, indeed, the first week of May. So 2 months. So we had a huge rally in 2016 to August. Huge. Then a big correction. And then from December to February, big rally, correction February to beginning of May. Been relatively flat for the last couple of weeks, but rose sharply last week. I said 2 Mondays ago, this is it, it's going to happen. No. I said last week, this is it, it's going to happen. And you know what? It did happen last week. I think I'm right in saying gold miners rose something like between 5 and 10%. It seems to me it's happening. You got to be in gold miners. I'm looking at gold, which is currently, I don't know, something like $12.40, $12.30 an ounce. I'm looking at gold at somewhere between $1,550 and $1,700 by the end of the summer into the autumn this year. Gold miners are going to go up absolutely like a rocket ship. I want to point out to you as well, uranium miners. I just tweeted today, Sunday, I'll post a chart along with the show. Uranium miners have been an absolute hell since 2011 when they peaked, Fukushima and all the rest of it. It went down something like 90%. I think it could be hot to trot. I think it's been building for literally 2 or 3 years. I think it started last year. I think it's hot to trot. At the very least, we're looking at a major rise to the 200-week moving average, the green line. But I think that's just the first stage. I see no reason why over the next 5, maybe 10 years, that couldn't go up 500%. If I was particularly bullish, it could take out the 2011 highs. It could double the 2011 highs. The index of mining shares could go up 1,000 or 2,000% over the next 10 years. I don't know. We shall see. But certainly a position in uranium miners will do you very handsomely. Briefly, quotes of the week. First of all, from one of my absolute heroes, Baroness Thatcher. That such an unnecessary and irrational project as building a European superstate was ever embarked on will seem in future years to be perhaps the greatest folly of the modern era, and that Britain, with traditional strengths and global destiny, should ever have become part of it, will appear a political error of the first magnitude. You can see why she's one of my all-time heroes. One of my other all-time heroes, as you well know, is Thomas Sowell. And he said this: when you want to help people, you tell them the truth. When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. Listener, I've had an absolute blast. I've really particularly enjoyed today's show. In due course, I want to do more on markets, but I do sufficient, I believe, to give you a really good insight in what you should be doing with your investments, with your pensions. Have an absolutely fantastic week, and I'll see you next time.